All right. All right, ladies. So I don't know if your sub printed off your rubrics for you or posted it or what she did. But at this time, if you can get it and put it in front of you so you can make notes, hopefully today this video will answer any questions you might have about your final exam. I know I keep calling it a final exam. Your final project, though, it's going to be for 150 points. You're going to present on the day of final exams. Yeah, so let's get started. So this is the goal of this project. It's on your rubric, but just in case you don't read it, we're going to go through it today. After spending an entire year in this class, it's my hope that you can take some of what you have learned and apply it to your life outside the classroom. Our faith calls us to know, love, and serve God. Hopefully this class has taught you something on how we can do that in our daily lives. The goal of this project is to allow you to discover and express how you can personally know, love, and serve God. This project will be presented to the class and done with a partner. So on your due date, it says exam day because depending on what hour you're in, that's a different day. But this is a project I do at the end of the year with all my students every year. And it's always been one of my favorite projects because I like to hear what you guys have to say. Um, and so there are a couple of key words in this statement: discover, express, and can. So that means that I want you to take this week, use your class time wisely. You can still lose participation points if you mess around during class. But take the time and discover the answer to these questions and practice expressing them. So practice your presentation because this is your final exam grade, so it will be graded stricter than a regular class assignment. And talk about the things you can do. So if you have no desire to practice the faith ever again, that's between you and God, but this whole presentation is to talk about ways that you can if you were to choose to. So the presentation is broken down in 3 different parts: knowing, loving, and serving God. So the first one is knowing God, and it's specific to the classroom, except for one of the questions. So the first question was, what were 3 things from this class that you liked the most? It does not have to be content related. Include why you liked it. So this would be things like, I really loved the class. I loved the students. I think we grew really close. And we had just a good time, or whatever. Or it could be, I really love the theme of the month, this one month, or I really loved the time of the day, even. And so it doesn't have to be content related. The next one does. And so this is 2 to 3 things that you found most interesting that you learned about this year. So it could be, we learned about the saints, we learned about the church, we learned about a little bit about Catholic social teaching, we learned a little bit about scripture, things like that. So these are pretty self-explanatory. What are 2 to 3 things that you hope to learn in theology before you graduate? So the majority of you are probably never going to take another theology class when you graduate. So what are a couple of things you really want to get out of your Catholic education? And then lastly, inside or outside the classroom, what do you think is the best way for someone your age to grow in their faith? So that might be, oh, I think praise and worship, I think scripture, I think mass, I think this, that, or the other. And for all of these questions, because you're doing your presentation with a partner, both of you have to have your own thing. So keep that in mind as you're presenting. So part 2, so this part's about loving God. In what ways have you felt called to imitate Christ? Where in your life can you serve? So since now we've entered the second part of our relationship with God, loving God means loving our neighbor. And so we do that by imitating Christ. We do that by acting like Christ would like. Every single one of you in this classroom has different opportunities to do that. Some of you, it might be your family. Some of you, it might be a sports team. Some of you, it might be at your church or where you volunteer or in the classroom. All of you guys can answer these differently. And you guys are all called differently. So some of you guys are called in different ways to share the love of God. So this is specific to the content that we've gone over. But we've talked about the church this semester, how it's one, Holy Catholic and Apostolic. How would you explain the church as a sign of God's love to a non-Christian? So keep in mind, a lot of the language we use, we're super duper comfortable with, but people who haven't been exposed to the Christian faith are not. And so I'm not talking about other denominations of Christianity. Most other denominations understand why church is so important and how it is a sign of God's love. So we're not talking about Christians, we're talking about atheists, agnostics, people who have no idea who Jesus is. Why is it so important for Catholics, and what can it do for us? And so why do we make an effort to be a part of a church? What does it accomplish in our lives? What does it do for us? And then lastly, what are 3 ways we can practice the faith outside of the church? And so this would be connected to the chapter we did last week. There's all these different Catholic social teachings that talk about our daily lives and our vocation and responsibility to these things. What are some of the ways that we as individuals in this classroom can live that out? And then lastly, serving God. So sharing God's love with other people. How can you serve in the church? So there are ways to serve outside the church, obviously. But what about in the church? What are some of the things we can do in the church to help the church in its mission? And so some of you guys I know are Eucharistic ministers. That's an example. Some of you might read at Mass. Some of you might help clean up the church after big events or serve at big events, or be altar servers, or help a priest do whatever he needs to be done. So it just depends. It depends on your parish. It depends on a lot of things. What are some of the gifts that you have that can be shared to show God's love? So some of you guys I've noticed throughout the year are very gifted speakers. So some of you might be able to help at something where that's a gift that you can share. Some of you guys might help with VBS because you're really good with kids. Some of you really love animals, so be good at an animal thing. Some of you guys might be really good at a sport, so you can serve at a sports function. So a lot of these questions throughout the whole presentation are very specific to individuals, because that's one of the reasons I love this project, is because I don't hear the same presentation 100 times over, because everybody has a different answer to all these questions. And then lastly, and this is content, so choose 2 pillars of the church. So that would be 1, Holy Catholic and Apostolic, and teach the class how they can use it to enrich their life. So how can understanding 1 enrich our lives? How can understanding Catholic or Apostolic or Holy, how can that enrich our lives? So that's this is like one of the bigger ones because it's part of the content. So I hope that answers your questions about your questions. As far as expectations, you will have to use Google Slides and PowerPoint for your presentation. I'm pretty sure, and your substitute might correct me on this, so if she does, listen to what she says, not me. But I'm pretty sure she's going to set up a folder for you guys, so you can submit place your slide and PowerPoint into this folder, and that way when it comes time for you to present, everything's all in the same place. And so that way because there will be a little bit of a time crunch, especially for 5th hour, because it's such a big class, and so we want things to go smoothly. So talk to your substitute about this part, but you will have to use Google Slides. And you must also include an outline. So I'm actually not going to be grading it, but I will be looking over them. And so I'm not going to be listening to everything you're saying. And so the idea of the outline is to kind of give me an idea of what each outline covered. And so, or what each slide covered, sorry. So if you use a ton of pictures and you explain the pictures out loud, I won't hear the explanation because I won't be hearing your presentation. So the outline is just sort of a summary of that. And then, yeah, so talk to yourself about how to submit it. So these are the things you guys are going to be graded on. It's 150 points. It's a big grade. It's your final. So you have to use proper grammar. This isn't, I don't want to hear a bunch of slang. I don't want to hear LOL or things like that. I don't think that I ever have in your classes, but things will be graded more strictly because it's your final. So proper grammar, it has to be organized and clear. It'll have to be 5 to 8 minutes. It can't go over because we're on a time crunch. And if it goes under it, it's probably because you're unprepared because there's a lot of questions. So you'll have a lot of information. They have to, your presentation has to include at least 12 slides. You can include more if you want. So there has to be an intro slide and a conclusion. And then the 10 questions we just went over can each have up to us, or they have to have at least a slide. And then you have to include at least some pictures, not in every slide, but at least a couple of pictures throughout. And lastly, so you have to have submitted your assignment before the presentation. I don't want everybody showing up the day of and running out of time because you guys weren't prepared. So you'll lose points for that if you didn't do it. There shouldn't be any laughing, mumbling. Some people really have a serious temptation to say yeah, way too much, and it's obnoxious, and you'll lose points if you do it. And then also do not read the entire presentation. So that's it. I hope you guys have, use your class time wisely. If you don't, you'll lose participation points. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or ask your substitute. Yeah. Have a great week, ladies. Good luck on your finals.